If you do not know your enemy, then you are doomed to lose your battle with him. Hey guys, it is Bible Scribe. I am glad to be back again. I'm starting a video series. One of the reasons I haven't been making videos in the past couple weeks is because I have been on this topic. It has gotten, the research involved was so massive, it's just taken days and days and days to get it all together. But that is what we are going to be talking about. This video series is Who is Satan? And it is actually a multi-part series. So we're going to talk about what's going to be in those videos briefly at the beginning of this one, and then go into some overview stuff for this video. But thank you for joining me. It is going to be incredible. I've gotten a lot of comments in my other video comments boxes about Satan. You know, some people think he exists, some think he doesn't. Some think it's not a he, some think it's an it or multiple its. You know, there's just so many ideas out there. I really wanted, you know, even just for myself to nail down what do all the sources that I have available to me say about the Satan and what that means and who it is, if anyone, and all these different ideas. Try to iron them out based on, you know, if you've seen my other videos, you know, I do that based on lots of different Christian sources, including the Bible. I usually start with the Bible and then branch out to all different Christian sources and Jewish sources, all ancient works, but that's my kind of thing. And so you're going to hear a lot of things in these videos that you probably won't hear or have not heard anywhere else, or at least not where they're all compiled like this. I will be totally honest, there is not a single place on the internet you can go to find out everything that you're going to see or hear in these videos. So if you can stick with me, this is going to bring to light some things you likely have not heard. But let me bring up my slide deck. You know, I mentioned how long this study was. The slide deck actually ended up being 125 slides. So that's why I had to break it up into the series. But the series obviously is about Satan and the identity of the one called Satan, and all that means. So it turned into a 6-video series, this being the first of them. And this is what's going to be in each video on the series. Part 1 is I call it an overview. We're going into some of the biblical narrative about Satan and general ideas about Satan. Part 2, we're going to talk about the entities or names Lucifer, Leviathan, and Hades. In Part 3, we're going to go into Thanatos, Abaddon, Samael, and Lilith. Part 4, we're going to do Satan, Tartarus, Baal, and Beliar. Part 5, we're going to do Azazel, Mastema, and the devil. And then part 6, we're going to do a summary of all the research together on Satan, because as we go through these different names and references to these different entities, figures, types, we're going to see connective tissue between all those. But to really understand that and grasp it all at once, it requires a summary. So that's what that's going to be. So please stick around for that, because it will make a lot of the other stuff connect together, which we will mention briefly going through, but that summary will have it all. And so that is kind of the overview of this series. So this is part 1, and in this video, it is an overview. We're going to review common ideas about Satan, just talk briefly about them. We're going to review the etymology of the word Satan. And etymology, if you don't know, is the word history or language history of a word. So where did the word come from? Why is it the way it is? There is a history behind that. And then number 3, we're going to look at not all, but some of the biblical mentions of the word Satan and see how that's used in the Bible itself. So let's jump in and get started on this first part 1 overview of who is Satan. So let's talk about common ideas of Satan. What do people generally think of when they hear the word Satan? And you'll know these, but let's just talk through them. You know, in Christianity, we have these ideas that, you know, Satan is the bad guy. He is, you know, the enemy of Christ, right? Some see Satan as the opposite of Jesus, like a yin and a yang. Like he's the equivalent but opposite. There's actually Christian denominations or sects that see it that way, as if they were brothers and one is good and one is evil. But this is not biblical, just so you know. It came from Zoroastrianism, which is an ancient religion out of the Babylon area, Persian country before Christ. Then the idea that Satan is the devil, and we're gonna in our other videos we're gonna go into both of those names and what they mean, where they came from. But again, Christians will say Satan is the devil. The idea that he may have horns and a tail. We have that picture that it's stuck throughout, probably from the Middle Ages onward, of a devil is a red being with horns, a tail, a pitchfork, a strange looking mustache. But anyway, that image is there. It may be funny to us, but that image is there. And then Satan as the Antichrist. This idea is also had among many Christians, so we may touch on that through our videos. And then, the word and name Lucifer is often, almost always, seen as synonymous with Satan by most Christians. So we are going to look at the name Lucifer in further videos. Now, in Judaism, it's a little different, slightly, but Jews consider Satan an entity, as opposed to, many people in general will, different types of Christians or whoever, students of the Bible, will try to say Satan is not an entity. Well, Jews and Judaism, they do believe that he is an entity, and that he is, not only is he considered evil, but there are aspects of him that are good, and that he is an obedient servant of God in a way, because he essentially has a role to fulfill and before God, and that he, is responsible for the dead. And this is all Jewish thought, but that is why he is considered a servant of God, even though, we would consider him evil as well. The role of man's accuser in God's court. So this is from some biblical narrative that we probably will look at, but that Satan accuses mankind before God in God's court of the heavenly, in his heavenly court around his throne. So before the highest level of angels, in that arena, that Satan is the accuser of mankind. Many Jews also consider Satan a metaphor for Yetzer Hara, and this is the everyday evil inclination that all people struggle against within themselves, not necessarily be a being or a demon. So there's this Jewish thought that Satan is really a metaphor for the struggle inside a man against evil, and that it is not a being, and so that would be a different view from the first, both residing inside of Judaism. It's a very secular Jewish viewpoint, but that this word Satan is a reference to this Yetzer Hara, which is the struggle inside a human to do good versus evil. And to shun the evil. And then rabbis, in this last point, say that God is the creator of good and evil, and it is up to mankind to choose. And so I say this is not biblical. I have another video where I go into why this is not biblical, but God says that man brought sin into the world in different writings and through different people. So I say that is not biblical, but these Jewish rabbis may say this. Some have this view that God created both good and evil and created mankind to choose between them. Jews in a lot of ways do see mankind's choice, his free will, as a duality kind of struggle. Like, am I going to do good today? Am I going to do bad today? And so that is there in Judaism. So now onto the etymology of the word Satan, the word history of the word. So it means adversary, and this is from the Hebrew. It means adversary, accuser, hindrance, or stumbling block. All the things we probably heard when people explain this word. In Hebrew, this is ha-satan, or the Satan, the adversary, and that is a reference. You can see that used as in Job 1. I recommend using an interlinear, and you can do that on BibleHub.com if you need one. But in Greek, this has become the word satanas, and you can see that used in Luke 22:3 as for instance. But this word has had a very clean etymology straight from Hebrew to Greek. So it is the same word, just redone in Greek, but means exactly the same thing. In Greek, it means adversary as well. And in the New Testament, the name Satan, just so you know, even though a lot of Christians want to think that the word Satan is always just a generic adversary term, the name in the New Testament is used many times in a proper sense in the Greek. So just so you know, it's capitalized. It has all the markings of a proper name. And not only that, there's also reference to a lot of the early church fathers and the early Christian writings that was the same way. Satan being the name of an entity. Even though definitely throughout the Bible, there are different cases where the word, especially in Hebrew, ha-satan, is used as a generic adversary term and not necessarily referencing the being that we might reference when we say the word Satan. So just realize that is the case. It's not really refutable. That is a known concept from all Greek scholarship. So at least we need to agree that there is a generic sense of ha-satan, but there is also the proper name Satan used, which means the same thing, comes from the same place, but it is a proper name. So now on to biblical mentions of the word Satan or Satan himself. We can talk about some of the attributes that the Bible gives this being Satan. In Luke 10:18, Satan fell from heaven. It says Jesus saw Satan. He says it himself. Jesus says he saw Satan fall from heaven like a star falling out of the sky, like lightning. And so that is one of the attributes we know of from the Bible narrative, that this entity, Satan, fell from heaven. Okay, it's very maybe obscure at this point, not a lot of detail surrounding that because that's all we hear when Jesus says that statement. But we do know now to look for the event where Satan fell from heaven. And then in the second point, Satan tempts men to do evil. Obviously, throughout the Bible, this is a common theme for this being. He tempts David in 1 Chronicles 21:1. We have an example of him tempting Job in Job chapters 1 and 2. And then he obviously tempts Jesus Christ in Matthew 4:1 through 11. And so based on that, we can know that that is a common theme, that this interaction with mankind where he tempts to do wrong is something Satan does. And then he does resist the good efforts of men. Not only does he tempt them to do wrong, but he would try to fight against someone that's doing right, just to make their efforts null and void or in vain. So an example of that, Zechariah 3:1, he resists Joshua the high priest and stops his efforts there. But these just things you can look up. I'm not going to go into super detail on all these. Encourage you to look up the verses and read through them. There's just so much that we got to keep kind of plodding through. Again, it's a 6-video series and we're only on the first. More attributes of Satan from the Bible. Satan and demons definitely work together in tandem. Demons working for Satan as his host. Jesus says Satan will not cast out demons, and that is in Matthew 12:26 and echoed Mark 3:23 and Luke 11:18. And you can read the wording in those passages, but the main idea is that Jesus makes a comment about Satan, that Satan will not cast out Satan, will he? And he's talking in context of a demon-possessed man. And so he's saying it in a matter-of-fact kind of way, obvious. He's making it obvious, that would not happen. Satan would not cast out demons. They are on the same team. And then Paul was hindered by a messenger, which was an angel of Satan, in 2 Corinthians 12:7, and again in 1 Thessalonians 2:18, two different times where Paul was stopped, hindered, withheld by an angel of Satan, one of his evil spirits, his evil host. Then Jesus has authority over Satan, is something we also see in the Bible. Luke chapter 4, verse 8, Jesus rebukes Satan in Peter. If you remember that, Peter is asking Jesus stuff, and Jesus says, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And he's referencing the fact that Satan is possessing or guiding Peter's actions at that point. Now we can speculate on whether that was through a demon or an evil spirit that was coaxing or pushing Peter, but regardless, Jesus rebukes Satan, the adversary, in Peter at that time. And then we have the point that Satan can enter people and use them. Jesus rebuking Satan shows his authority, but then another example of Satan using was Judas Iscariot. Satan enters him, and it says so in Luke 22:3 and in John 13:27. Both those places mention that event where after the Lord's Supper, Jesus said to Judas, "Go and do what you will," and then Judas leaves and Satan enters him to work his purposes through him at that time. So another attribute, biblical attribute, is that Satan can transform himself into an angel of light. You've probably heard this passage before in 2 Corinthians 11:14, that he can change his form. And whether he can do multiple forms, any form he wants, that's not specified, but he definitely can transform himself into the visage of an angel of light. And it also says that in that same passage, his ministers, his hosts, his angels can also appear as ministers of light. So that is the case. And then Satan is equivalent to, in Revelations 12:9 and 22, all these three terms: the serpent, the devil, and the dragon. And I think each of those passages, if I'm not mistaken, mentions all of those terms together in context with the term Satan. So we know that those are either synonymous terms with Satan or at least allegorical symbol pictures of Satan. So when we hear serpent, we can raise our antenna and know it could possibly be talking about Satan, because it calls Satan the serpent. Same with devil, same with dragon. So other biblical mentions of Satan, like I mentioned earlier in the video, we can't go through every single one. There's a lot. There's I think I remember 50 or 60 different actual usages of the word Satan in the Bible. But these are a few that we're not going to go through, but these are mentions where, Christians have come to believe that these mentions are of Satan, but they use different terms. And so this is going to spur on some of the information we go through in our other videos. But all these different names, a lot of Christians think these are all Satan. So we're going to have to look at each of these in our other videos. But we have Lucifer in Isaiah 14. We have the word and name the devil, and there's many references, but Matthew 4:1 is a good one where Christ is tempted in the wilderness, and of course that's attributed to Satan, but also uses the word devil. The prince of Tyre in Ezekiel chapter 28, Ezekiel prophesies against him at God's instruction, and so many people think that prince of Tyre is a reference to Satan. Beelzebub in Matthew 12:24, Mark 3:22. There's 7 different mentions that I found of Beelzebub in the Bible. In the New Testament, I believe, was most of them. A few in the Old. But the title Prince of Devils is used with Beelzebub. But many people think that is Satan. That Beelzebub is just another term for Satan. And so we're going to look at that in a future video. Abaddon in Revelation 9:11 is the only place that name is mentioned in the Bible, and we're going to look at that. But just so you know that Revelation 9 calls Abaddon the king of the locust being the entities that are released from the abyss in Revelation, and Abaddon being the king over them. And so that is the mention there in Revelation. And then in Revelation chapter 20, the name Thanatos. And the name or the word in Greek, Thanatos, is used multiple times throughout the New Testament. I picked this one to show here, but there are others. But that death, and the Greek word being Thanatos, and hell, the Greek word being Hades, were both cast into the lake of fire in Revelation 20:14. So when I came out of just looking at the Bible, the biblical references, and briefly going through different ideas people had on Satan, all these different names came out, and I needed to do more research. That is where these videos all are born from, and that is all these names. We have Belial, Baal or Balaam, Beelzebub. We have Beelzebub, both different spellings that mean slightly different things. Abaddon. We have Lucifer, Thanatos, Satan, Hades, Tartarus, devil. So we need to know, how do all of these relate, or do they overlap? Do some mean the same thing? Do they all mean Satan, or do they not? We have to find this out, because to be honest, there's nowhere on the internet I could go, no video I could watch, no website I could go to that told me all these things. At least definitely not in a concise format. But I don't think at all I could find most of this. So we're coming to the end of this part 1 video, but coming in part 2, we are going to discuss Lucifer, Leviathan, Hades, and Thanatos, the first 4 of our names that we're going to have to go through and look at different sources. What we're going to do is read all the different sources we can find on these different entities and names of entities to see if they match a profile for one entity called Satan or not. So that's what we will be doing. So come back and join me for part 2. And that is the end of the overview, general overview for Satan. I encourage you to do your own study as we go through this. Man, there's so much information. Like I said, this took me weeks, literally, to do all of it and get in a format I could teach it. But that is our overview. Thank you for joining me for this short video, but there will be 5 more in the series, so look out for them as I post them, and give me a like and subscribe if you're getting something out of these. God bless. Thank you for joining me.